Welcome to tonight's live stream. If you don't know me, my name is Hayley Curtis, and tonight I'm going to be sharing with you about my top tips for behaviour management, which is my most passionate aspect of teaching and what I really love to do. So I'm really happy to be on here sharing with you guys just my experience, because that's where everything's going to come from. So if you have any questions as I'm going, if you just type it in, I'll see it come up and I'll answer all of the questions at the end. So please do feel free to type those in, because I'd love to interact with you, and hopefully I'll be able to answer anything that you want to know more about. So just to get started, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me and my experience in the education world, so that you can get a little bit of perspective of where I'm coming from when I'm sharing with you the things I'm going to share. So I have been teaching for 5 years now, and I absolutely love it. I'm super passionate, and I think that teaching is just one of the most fun things in the world. But with my experience, I have spent all of those 5 years working in what are called metro teaching program schools. So in other words, I've always worked in hard to staff schools. So that means I've been working in communities, low socioeconomic communities, with children who, some who come from pretty tough homes, and a lot of kids with severe behaviour issues. So for a little bit of perspective on that, my very first job 5 years ago, I started midterm 2, which is tough enough as it is, but not only that, it was a hard to staff school, and in that one class I had 9 children on individual behaviour management plans for severe behaviour issues. So talk about being thrown in the deep end. I think it's the best way to go, because, you know, I threw myself in there, and that's where I had no choice but to learn these skills that I'm going to share with you tonight, because there definitely is a knack to it. And I believe that over the last 5 years, I mean, I've made a lot of mistakes along the way as I've been learning, but I definitely feel quite confident now with my behaviour management skills, and have seen that manifest in the classes that I teach now, and getting to see students really thriving. So what I'm going to do is just share my top tips and what I have found has been most effective for me in the classroom setting. And like I said, if you have questions, fire them away, because I know that as a teacher myself, that's what I've done my whole career, is just learn off other people. Just so eager to see what's working for others and then implement it myself, because, you know, sometimes, I mean, that's the way that we learn. So the number one thing that I focus on in the classroom is preventative behaviour management strategies, and I really think this is key, really focusing on sort of squashing those behaviours before they occur. And the number one way that you can do that is by engaging your students in your lessons. So, I mean, you can engage kids in lessons in so many different ways, but the way that I like to do it is have it fast paced, and I also like to have every single student involved in that lesson. And the way that I do that is I use a lot of think, pair, shares. So if I'm ever asking a response from the class, instead of saying, oh, I'll put your hand up to answer this question, I will always say, turn to someone near you and tell them what you think about that. Turn to someone near you and discuss that, or talk about what you think the answer is. So you've got everyone turning to each other and interacting already. And the best thing about this is that those kids that might be academically struggling, which can sometimes be the ones that have some difficult behaviours, they're going to turn and maybe they hear someone that has the answer. So even if they didn't have the answer, they're hearing it from someone else, which actually gives them a chance to participate. So after I've done that think, pair, share, I never, ever ask for hands up. ever. I always pick non-volunteers, and I do that by having names on pop sticks in a cup. You can do it any way that you want, but by doing this, all the kids know that they can be called upon at any time. So they know that in that think, pair, share, they're going to be switched on and listening to what that other person's saying, because it could be then that is pulled out. So instead of hands up, I will then just pull out a stick. Boom, you, tell me what you talked about. You, tell me what you guys spoke about. Who can add to that? And that just, I find that gets everybody involved in the lesson. And you've just, that's such a great preventative strategy. And you know what, when you first start doing that, you might have a couple of those tricky end sort of kids that they don't seem to be getting involved straight away, but give it a few weeks and they will start participating. I mean, in one of my toughest classes that I had, I'm talking super tough, a lot of really severe behaviors. I had a few that as I'm doing these sorts of lessons, they started off, they wouldn't be participating. They'd be at the back, sitting in their chair, but just left it, and I kept running with it. And as the days went on, they'd get closer and closer, and within a few weeks, they're down there on the mat with their whiteboard, getting involved because they can see what's happening there, and they want to be a part of that. So it really, really does work. One of my other preventative strategies that I use is framing everything in a positive way. So I try and never speak a negative sentence in the classroom. I mean, this is probably the toughest thing, because you've always got to be purposeful with it, and you've got to be switched on all the time, because it's so easy to see a kid doing something and then say, sit down or stop talking. Like, it's so easy to say that, but I try my best to always phrase it positively. And for example, what I might do is, say a kid's sitting on the mat and they've called out. Instead of saying to that kid, don't call out, I would say, I would absolutely love it if you could pop your hand up. That is phrasing it in that different way, and they are then not feeling like, oh, I've done the wrong thing. They think, oh yeah, she'll love it if I pop my hand up. The hand will go up, they're smiling, it's positive. That's the same for anything. I might say, oh, I'd love it if you were sitting on your bottom. I would love it if I was looking out and saw everybody's eyes on me. It just brings more life and positivity into the classroom instead of bringing those negative words, because words are powerful and it can bring the atmosphere down. Another way that you can do that as well is pointing out the people who are doing the right thing. So like, oh, I love how Jessica's sitting on her bottom, eyes this way. Oh, amazing, amazing, amazing. So instead of focusing on the negative, you're bringing the positive into it. And that can really squash a lot of those smaller behaviors straight away. So I love doing that. Another thing that I think is super important is having really precise and structured transitions between your lessons and between moving from place to place. So if you're moving from mat to desk, desk to mat, mat to lining up at the door, all of these different transitions should have a really, really strict routine that you don't let kids get away with anything less than your high expectation. Because I have found that it's during those transitions where a lot of those little niggly behaviors can take place, and a lot of things can sort of explode into bigger events than what they need to be. So by really having a very structured transition, you squash a lot of those behaviors straight away. And I mean, at the start of the year or whenever, I mean, if you're wanting to start this tomorrow, start it tomorrow. Really focus on that for a solid couple of weeks. It doesn't just happen overnight. In the past, I've worked on transitions for maybe a whole term if it's a really tough class, and just never accept anything less than your high expectation. If they don't get it right, all right, we're back to the mat, let's try it again. Don't get it right, all right, we're back again, let's try again. Just always expecting the kids to rise to that high level, because if you set high expectations and you don't draw back from those, they will get there and they will rise to those expectations. So doing that as well, and make your transitions fun as well. It doesn't just need to be come to the mat and everyone just walk silently. You can do things like have a certain song that you play that means kids need to put their books away and come to the mat. How fun does that make it? Like when you hear this song, you need to pack it away and come to the mat. There's so many different ways. I mean, be creative with it and make it work for your class. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is the behaviors that you want to see stopped. So I've just been talking about a lot of those preventative stuff, stopping things before they happen. The other thing that you can do is if you're starting to see negative behaviors in your classroom and during certain times of the day, what I like to do and what I've seen work really, really well is incorporating that into my morning meeting or my community circle time or whatever it is that you do with the whole class. So what I would do is get them all in first thing in the morning, we sit in a circle, and whatever behavior it is that I'm wanting them to work on, we're going to discuss that in the morning. So for example, maybe it is lining up at the door when we're going to a different class. So that morning, I would talk to them about examples and non-examples. Those are two of the keywords, examples and non-examples. So we would discuss as a class, okay, lining up at the door. What do you think I expect you to be doing? What should I see? What should I see you doing when you're lining up at the door? Get the kids to brainstorm. You'd see us walking quietly. You'd see us standing in the line with our hands to ourselves. You'd see us being kind to each other. So get them to brainstorm what it would look like. Then I also get them to brainstorm what are non-examples. So I'd say, what would I not want to see? What would I not want to see when you're lining up at the door? And they'll start to brainstorm these things. Okay, you wouldn't want to see us talking. You wouldn't want to see us running. And getting them to verbalize these things, it actually allows them, to visualize what it's actually meant to look like. And a key is here, while we get them to brainstorm what it shouldn't look like, you should never get them to act that out because that actually reinforces negative behavior. So afterwards, I would then get them to act out all of those things that we said we should see, the good examples. So then we practice it a couple of times, and then I'll ask kids like, okay, what did you see that was what I should be seeing? Did you see anything that maybe I wouldn't want to see? And we'll practice that, practice. And if you do that over and over and over again, it'll start to just naturally happen in your classroom. And that leads me into the other one, which is role playing. Oh my gosh, role playing has absolutely revolutionized my behavior management, and I have seen such awesome results from this. So when you find there's a certain situation with your kids that they're struggling with their behavior, for me, my example that I'll use is my kids last year really struggled with lunchtime and recess, interacting with each other and playing handball. So they would play handball at recess and lunch, and it would always end in fights or tears or, bins being thrown and whatever. And so I identified this as being a really tough situation for these guys. And so what we did was we began to role play playing a game of handball. And again, we brainstormed, okay, what should it look like? What does being a good sport look like? What should it look like when you get out? What should it look like when you win? We really brainstormed this stuff, and then one or two skills at a time, we would go outside, get the ball and play a game of handball, but we were focusing on those skills. So it wasn't going out to have a good time and play, it was going out to role play and practice the skills that we were talking about. And I mean, at the start when I first started doing this, I was like, oh, is this going to work? But we did that every day. We just kept going, and then before you know it, you're walking out there on duty at recess or lunchtime and you see the kids playing this game and they're showing the behaviours that we were talking about. They are starting to act out what we had role played. If you get them to practice enough times, they're actually going to start doing that naturally, and that has just been invaluable for me. And I mean, initially you think, oh gosh, this is going to take up a lot of time in my program, or I'm going to have to find a chunk of time in my week to do this role playing. But if you can get the kids behaving properly and responding and getting along with each other, in the long run, that's going to open your program up so much more for everything else that you have to do. So it really is worth spending the time. So to be honest with you, I probably did this for maybe an hour a day. But that, I mean, that's coming from a perspective of really, really severe behavior kids. So maybe you might not have to do that much, but it is definitely worth your time. So whatever it may be that you're finding the kids are struggling with a bit with their behavior, just role play it, brainstorm it, get them to take control over it, and it's going to start to become habit for them. Really, really great for me. And the last thing that I think is super important with behavior management is the relationships that you form with those kids, because as you start to really create that relationship of mutual respect, it just absolutely changes everything when it comes to behavior management. And I mean, there's quite a few things that we can do as teachers to really build that bridge to connect with that child, because especially if a child has severe behavior problems, and if they've had severe behavior problems for many years, they may feel quite disconnected to teachers, and it's our job to reach out to them and build that bridge. And it's something that I focus on right from day one. You know, getting allies straight away. So picking those kids that maybe are your pointy end kids, or the kids that could easily sway either way, and really investing the time in those kids, because once you get them on board, it helps to get a lot more on board as well. So some of the things that I would do is, the number one thing I do is I'm vulnerable with my kids, and I share quite a bit about me with them, because I can't expect them to share everything about them with me if I'm not willing to do the same back. So I like to be really open with my students about what's going on in my life and who I am, and they really appreciate that. And by me opening it up, it then allows them, it gives them permission to open up back to me. And when you have kids with severe behavior issues, I mean, it's not that they're just born that way. There's things going on deeper within them and their life, and maybe things that they're dealing with that are resulting in their behavior issues. So by opening up to them and allowing them to open up back to you, you might find that you're able to work through a lot of the stuff that's causing the behavior issues in the first place. And another thing that I do is, like, I ask my kids heaps of questions. I really want to get to know them on a deep level. And sometimes I'll do this, you know, even during a lesson when everyone's working away at something, I might just go sidle up next to a kid and strike up a conversation, ask them a few questions, and it makes them feel so valued, and it makes them feel like they're cared about, and it makes them feel like I'm trying to understand them. And what the kids want is they want to feel understood. So that goes a really, really long way with the kids. And I also, you know, to stretch that relationship as well, sometimes I'll go out, if I'm not on duty, I'll go and I'll sit with a different group of kids every couple of days for lunch. While they're sitting out there, wherever your kids eat lunch, mine would eat it in the undercover area. I'd go and I might sit with the boys one day and just, you know, chatting away. One day I might go sit with the girls. Other days, if I'm not on duty, I'll go play a bit of basketball with the boys, or I'll go get involved in the handball game. And that just really, again, is building that bridge, and it's building that mutual respect. And once you've got that in the classroom, it just goes such a long way for being able to deal with behaviours. And you add that with being positive and being preventative. If you add all of this together, you end up with quite a smooth sailing classroom where suddenly behaviours isn't a big issue anymore, and you can actually teach your program, which is really exciting. So that is all of my main points that I had written down to share with you tonight. I'm just going to quickly scroll through and see if anyone have you worked in special education? What strategies do you have for movement seeking kids? So Gina, I haven't specifically had like a class of special education, but I have definitely had kids with autism in my class, and definitely making sure that I do use a lot of brain breaks as well. I don't just throw brain breaks out there all the time. I read the class, and if I feel like they need one, I'll do one. I won't just do one for the sake of it, because if we're going well and we're on a roll, I want to keep going and I want to utilize that. But if I can see kids getting a little bit restless or something like that, definitely get them up and get them moving. And I try and have quite a few transitions throughout my lessons, structured transitions, so the kids know, okay, I'm sitting here on the mat, but I know I'm not going to be here for that long, or I'm sitting here doing this bit of work, but I know that I'm going to be getting up in a second. So the kids should get into the routine of knowing that you're going to have them up and about and changing things over, and that the class is fast paced and moving, so then they don't get restless like that. That's what I would suggest. What does this one say? Needed to hear a bit about framing positively. Lost a few students because I was finding the negative. Yeah, and I mean, it's so easy to, like I said before, it's so easy just to say that negative thing, and it's what comes naturally. If you see someone doing something wrong, you're just like, stop doing that. Sit down, and it's so easy to get into that. And I mean, I've had days where I've caught myself out. So I really have to remind myself and be on purpose about it. So at the start of the day, when I come into the classroom, I center myself of the fact, okay, I'm going to bring positivity, and when a kid does this, I'm going to frame it in a positive way. And I've even found that it works even... You're pointing kids that can have those really tough behaviors. Sometimes it can be really tough to connect with them, but if you just look that kid in the eye and think in your mind, I love you, I care about you, even if you don't, say it to yourself, and it will change your whole demeanor. It will even change the muscles on your face, so that that kid will feel that love from you, and that will help to sort of shift it as well. So you just really got to come in with that positive mindset. Okay, another question here. What kinds of things would you do for those students who have individual behaviour plans? So definitely a lot of the strategies I'm talking about have been whole class strategies. Then, as well as having that whole class strategy, I would also, the kids that are on individual behaviour management plans, I would have them with their own, usually, depending on the kid, usually it works to have a little checklist for them. So I usually have a whole class rewards program, which I can give you a couple of examples of that in a second. And with the individual kids that are super tough, they might have a little tick chart separated into, say, 10 or 20 minute blocks. If they're real severe end kids, 10 minutes. If I feel they're coming along, maybe 20 minutes, and they'll have a reward. So even every half an hour, if you have to. It depends what kind of kid they are, what their behaviours are like. You know, for 10 minutes, and I wouldn't just say you've got to be good for 10 minutes. I will give that child a goal, a specific goal. So whatever I want them to work on. So it might just be you have to raise your hand if you want to speak. So it's nothing else, it's just raising their hand. So if for that 10 minutes or that 20 minutes, if they've raised their hand when they want to speak, they get a tick. I'm not thinking about anything else. Maybe it was I'm focusing on I want them to speak with kindness to the other students in the class. So that'll be their goal. It'll be written on there clearly, and that's what we're focusing on. If they do that for the 10 minutes, they get a tick. So I'm not expecting the world of them, but I am expecting them to be working on something that they know they need to work on. And after maybe a few weeks or even a term of me setting their goals for them, I will then get them to start setting their goals. Because with this child, part of the process is talking about that goal. Okay, what could we do? What's an example? What's a non-example? And after you've done this with them for several weeks, they're going to be able to start setting the goals themselves. So you could say, okay, what do you think that you need to work on today? And they might say, oh, I think that yesterday I wasn't too good at putting my hand up, so I want to focus on that. And they're going to start taking ownership over those goals. and start to really progress in their behaviour. So that's something that I definitely use every time. And also you can give them a bit of choice with their reward, whether it be, 10 minutes playing a bit of Lego, or maybe it will be free drawing. Give them a little bit of choice with that. What else do we have here? Feel free to so thinking I love you, that works so well. And I mean, I do that just in life in general. I don't just do it with the kids, I do that just with everyone. When I'm walking around, at the shops or whatever, if you think that in your mind when you look at someone, it's just amazing how much easier you can connect with that person. And just quickly before I finish up, I'll just give you a couple of examples of the whole class behaviour management strategies that I've used. I like to change it up every term or two, because I want to keep the kids on their toes. I want to keep it fun and exciting. I don't like using behaviour management whole class strategies where there's a negative. So for example, like the PEG charts where they all start on green and they can go down or go up. I don't like to use things where they can go down, because you'll find, especially if you've got severe behaviour kids, they'll be like, oh, I want to go down, I'm bad, put me down on the bottom. And if they're down there, they almost feel like it's a good thing. So that doesn't work, I don't think. So it needs to be something that's always positive. And one of my favourite ones that I like to do is I create a board game up on a wall somewhere in the room, and I do it like Monopoly style, and I have all the kids at the start of the term, they will make their own game piece. So they design it, colour it in, they can put whatever they want on it, bit of blue tack, I laminate them and they all pop them up on the board. And then throughout the day for positive behaviours, I might do ticks or points or whatever, and once they get 3 ticks they get to roll a dice. So they come up either I usually do it just before recess, just before lunch, end of the day, so it's not interfering with my program. They get to come up, roll the dice and move their piece along, and throughout the board there'll be different prizes. So maybe they get to choose a friend to sit next to for an hour, maybe they there's one prize on the whole thing, like 40 squares, there's one thing of like 10 minutes iPad time. So there's not a whole heap of prizes on there, so you're not giving out prizes all the time, but because they get to roll, it sort of gives them that encouragement. They want to roll, they want to see if they can get it. And then I've got the chance and the community chest, and with chance that it could be a good thing or a bad thing, so they might get something positive, but then they might pull out that they have to do 10 star jumps or something. So just making it interactive and interesting, I found that has worked really, really well, and the kids tend to love that, and you can easily switch that up every term. I mean, other times I've done coins where they have little banks and they can put them in, and then they can purchase stuff like once a fortnight or something like that. That's worked really well too. But the board game is probably my favourite one that I've done, just because it gets everybody interacting and really positive, and then you don't have to be giving prizes out all the time, because certain behaviour management strategies you can end up just spending so much money on prizes, and you don't want the kids to be needing that all the time. You just want to create a bit of excitement. So that is everything that I have down to talk to you about tonight. But please, if you're watching the replay of this and you're not live, feel completely free to add me on Facebook and private message me with any of your questions. I'd absolutely love to get in contact with you and interact with you. I'm more than happy to help, because this is definitely one of my passions. So please do feel free. So thank you to everybody who jumped on tonight, and thank you, Doa, for organising this as well. I hope you were able to get something out of it, and I hope that you're having an amazing term 1, and that you can implement maybe some of these things into your classroom and see some positive outcomes. All right, guys, thank you so much for having me, and yeah, get in contact with me if you like. See you later.